I'm Whitney Fung with the University of Florida IFES Extension and Indigent Healthcare. Welcome back on some tips for healthy eating. So today we're going to be talking about whole grains. And we talked a lot about my plate already, and we have that balanced meal, and so a quarter of your plate should be grains. And grains are your breads, your rice, your cereals, your pastas, and the dietary guidelines are recommending now to make half your grains whole grains. And so what are whole grains? If you've heard of Cheerios or 100% whole wheat bread or 100% whole wheat pasta or brown rice, those are examples of whole grains. And the difference is that there are also refined grains. So instead of that whole wheat bread, you have white bread. Or instead of the brown rice, you have white bread. And so you want to focus on eating more whole grains because there's a lot of benefits for eating foods with high fiber. And so if you've heard of Cheerios will lower your cholesterol or oatmeal will lower your cholesterol, it's because of that fiber. And if you think of fiber, it's very good for our digestive system because you can think of it kind of like a sponge. If you consume those foods, it kind of cleans out your arteries and it lowers the cholesterol and it just goes around like a sponge pretty much. And so you want to focus more on eating whole grains. So what really makes up that whole grain? And so here we have a kernel of wheat. And it's the anatomy of a grain really. So if you think about any type of grain or even a seed, so think about a sunflower seed. And so you have a kernel here. You have that outside shell, that's called the bran. That's the outside shell. Then you have the endosperm. That's that white starchy part. And then you have the yellow part. That's called the germ. That's where all the nutrients are. And so the difference between a refined grain and a whole grain is that the whole grain has all those three parts still intact. So if you were to eat a wheat bread or whatever whole grain you're consuming, it might be a little bit rough. That's because the grains are still there. You could still taste that seed and still feel the texture of it. Whereas a refined grain, during the milling process, they strip that bran and they strip the germ, and all that's left is the endosperm, that white starchy part. So if you think of like a white bread, you can kind of roll it in a ball because all that's left is that white starchy part. And then they have to add back the nutrients of what they took out. That's why you might see enriched white flour sometimes on an ingredient list. So there's a couple of ways to make sure you're consuming whole grains. One is by looking to see if that package has 100%. So you want to see the numbers 100% on the package. Second is you want to make sure the word whole is there because that means that whole grain is still there. Now third is by looking at the ingredient list. It's not always guaranteed, but if you look on an ingredient list, the first couple of items are the most by volume of that product. So that means that at the end of that ingredient list, it's the lowest of whatever that product's made of. So if that first ingredient says enriched white flour, even though the item says wheat bread, it's not a whole grain. So you want to make sure it says 100% whole wheat flour or whole wheat bread. So make sure you check those things. There's also one other way that you can check, and I have Bethany Tate here, who is a Kaiser University dietetic student, to share that with you.
Hi, Whitney.
Hi.
Yeah, you've shared some great tips on looking for whole grain foods in the grocery store, but I'm going to share one other secret that not many people know about. You can look for the whole grain stamp. There are actually two kinds of whole grain stamps. The basic stamp means that there are at least 8 grams or more of whole grains in one serving of the food. So you might see this on some cereals, granola bars, or crackers. Or you can look for the 100% whole grain stamp, which is really the gold standard for whole grains. And this means that all of the ingredients in that food are 100% whole grain based. So this could be 100% whole wheat bread, or crackers, or flour, or even oatmeal. Another great feature of the stamp is it does remind you to eat the recommended minimum of 48 grams of whole grains every day.
Thank you, Bethany. Exactly, so make sure you remember how to check for whole grains, and don't forget, when you consume more fiber and when you consume whole grains that you're not used to, make sure to stay hydrated because like a sponge, it also needs that water as well. That's all we have for you today. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
For more information on this tip or any of the other 10 tips to a great plate, visit choosemyplate.gov.